I took a certificate class from the Whole Being Institute out of Kripalu, and it was taught by Tal Ben-Shahar, who came from Harvard and still holds the record for the most highly attended class at Harvard. And he left to start Whole Being Institute with Megan McDonough and Maria Sarah, who some of you got to meet last week at Hill Holiday. And the whole reason that they're doing it is because their belief in the study of who we are at our best needs to be spread. And so it's all about paying it forward. So what you're seeing is my final project. So I call it my Year of Whittling because that's what I felt like I was doing throughout the year. And when we were at Kripalu, you had to give it a couple of times in order to do it at the end. And so people started to hear that there was a whittler. Oh, did you hear the Year of Whittling? Did you hear about the... And so this guy, Sebastian, came running up to me and he's like, "You're the whittler." And I said, you know it's a metaphor, right? So the history of psychology is that it's always focused on what's broken, and positive psychology tries to focus on what works and try to amplify that. Psychology started really with B.F. Skinner, who we probably all studied in school, behavioral psychology. And the next really big thing was psychoanalysis with Sigmund Freud. And then in 1950, there was something called humanistic psychology. But it lacked scientific rigor. And so it turned into Make Love Not War. It turned into the hippie movement. And then in 1998, a gentleman named Marty Seligman from UPenn was named the president of the American Psychology Association. And at his inaugural speech, he said that his mission was to bring a network of scholars to what he called positive psychology to prove the science of happiness. So where do we get happiness? 50% on average of our happiness comes to us through our genetics. On average. And about 10% comes from our environment. We don't live in a war-torn environment. We live in a pretty benign place, so about 10% on average. So about 40% of our happiness we can bring to ourselves through our intentional practices. We can create our own happiness. I'll take 40% of anything, right? 40% is a lot. The first thing you learn in positive psychology is to ask a different question. There's power in asking in a positive way. So I was walking around about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, wondering why I didn't have any time to do what I wanted to do. I kept asking myself, what was wrong? Why was I so busy? And instead, I should have turned it around and asked a different question. What does my heart say? What's working? What's going well? So we were at Kripalu, and there was about 200 of us. Most of us were coaches and teachers and social workers and psychologists and there was a small handful of us from the business world, and we kind of clung together. So they told us we couldn't pair up with somebody that from our little fiefdoms. We had to find somebody that we didn't know. So we sit down and we pair up, and the exercise is, tell us about your favorite place on earth. And then what you're supposed to do is just listen and reflect and not say anything, just listen. So I pair up with a woman from Israel. Her name is Leah. And she tells me about her favorite place on earth is the patio in her backyard where she watches the sunset. And I'm listening, which I try to be really good at. And I'm listening. And she finishes her story. And she talks about how she's going to go back and she's going to try to see that sunset as many times as she can. But remember, I wasn't supposed to say anything, so I just listened. And then it was my turn to talk. And I told her about Maine. So since my 23-year-old was 5, I've taken 2 weeks a year every summer. So I was telling her about this, and I said, you know, that second Sunday night in the middle when I know I have a week left of vacation, that is my favorite place on earth. And she said, Kelly, you'll have to find a way to bring Maine home. And I was thinking, she's not supposed to say anything. But I wrote it down. I wrote, find a way to bring Maine home, you know. And like they say in the book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, sometimes the truth comes knocking, and you tell it to go away because you're busy looking for the truth. And it wasn't until, I don't know, a couple months after leaving Kripalu and going through the exercises that I realized that was the question I needed to be asking myself. How can I bring that feeling of Maine when I get on the train or on the elevator, or at the end of the day when I walk through the door and I don't bring all of the crap from work in with me? How can I bring Maine home? So I want to tell you how I did it, but this is not a how-to. This is about practice. How-tos don't work. You see somebody that loses 20 pounds and you go ask them, how did you lose 20 pounds? And they tell you, that's not going to work for you, right? It's about practice. And you can create new neuronal pathways by repeating the same practice every day for at least 30 days. This is why years of New Year's resolutions gave me nothing better than a good January. Because I wasn't practicing. I can tell you for years, be present, eat better, get more sleep, get home from work early, work out. Does it sound familiar? Like it's everybody's list, right? And I would do that, and then in the middle of February, I'd be like, I'm so done with these resolutions. Because I was trying to do them all at once, and I didn't understand that if I just broke them down and did them one at a time for 30 days each, I would actually be able to affect real change in my brain. After the war, when Japan was completely decimated, the people of Japan were so overwhelmed that they just decided, I'm going to do one thing each day until it's better. It's called Kaizen change. So when you get overwhelmed, Kaizen, because Kaizen change pushes away the threat of change. Just break it down into small bits, just get started, pick something and do it for 30 days. And I don't know about you, but when I want to do something like work out, I have to have a goal. I have to sign up for a triathlon 60 days away. That's why those apps like Couch to 5K work, because they break it down and they give you something to do for 30, 60, 90 days. So we're going to do an exercise. You have note paper. You are asked to come with a story of someone that you admire and pair up with somebody and just share. You can do it in groups of 2, I would prefer, so that we can keep the time. And while your partner is telling you their story of who they admire, what you're looking for, what are those strengths, those traits, those values that that person embodies, and you want to write those down. I did this with my team, and it worked really well. So I'll tell you a story, and then you can start making your list. I am the oldest of 6. I'm the only white kid in my family. Everyone else is adopted. I did have a sister who died of CF when she was diagnosed at 8 months old. My father went from the hospital where she was diagnosed to the hospital where he could have a vasectomy, because he just was like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. You know, she has CF, it's genetic, I don't want any more kids. And my mother was like, what? No, we're having a huge family. We just have to figure out another way to do it. So they learned about adoption, and it was 1968. And at the time, you had to commit, if you were going to adopt a non-white child, to adopting more than one. And so they did. They checked non-white, they committed, and that's how our family was created. Everybody's family is different. That's the story of my family. So you may have heard me as I told that quick story, and you can take more time with yours. I'm just trying to model the, the exercise. That my mom was courageous, and that my dad was decisive, and that there was a lot of love. So as you hear your stories, your partner's stories, I want you to write those things down. What are the traits and the strengths that you hear? So we'll take turns, we'll switch, you'll each get a turn to tell a story. Look at your list, and what are the no fewer than 4, no more than 8 if you have a really long list, but no more than 4 that are most resonant for you. That when you think about that list, the things that are most resonant, most important, the things that speak to you the most, circle those. So now I want you to write, I am, whatever you circled. If you circled courageous, you write, I am courageous. So this was transformational for me and for everybody in the room at Kripalu. What you just did was at some level you remembered who you are when you are your best self. It's really hard to do that if somebody were to ask you, what are your most important character strengths? What are your best traits, right? That jams you up. You can't think about what your best traits is if somebody asks you directly. But when you were a little kid, when you had dreams that were so big that had no limits on them in terms of not having enough money to fulfill a dream, not being in the right place, not knowing the right person, who you were, very raw, your core, that's what you just started to identify. What happens in life as you go through is that well-meaning, loving adults, coaches, teachers, and some not so well-meaning, put limits and labels on you. Limits like, you're so athletic, really good, unless that's all you're known for, or you're so lazy, or you're so messy. Why are you always so disorganized? And you start to wrap these limiting beliefs around your core. How about you're perfect? Like, is there anything worse to say within earshot of your kid, oh, she's my perfect child? There's nothing more limiting, because then if you're the perfect, the most athletic, the most artistic in your family, and that's all you're known for, then you start to have this fear of being found out. That I'm not that. I knew this family where there was one girl was the artist, one girl was the athlete, one girl was the brain, and one girl didn't know who she was because her sisters were so defined that she didn't have her own identity. And so what do? You create a facade or an image, and that's what you bring into the world every day. It's not the person that puts their head on the pillow at the end of the night or shares their most intimate secrets with their spouse or their partner, but it's the person that you bring into the world. And the only way to cut back through and get back to the core is to reflect what you admire in someone else. Because it turns out that those things you value most in people that you love are the things that you value most in you. So what you've just done is identified your core ideal self. You've just reminded yourself of who you are at your best. When I did this, I was like, wow, like, I can go home now. I don't need the rest of the year. Here's mine. I am open. I have traditions. I am a positive force. I use my influence for good. I am able to change. I am grateful. I am a listener. I am myself always. And I am courageous. And so the next thing that you do after you've developed your list is to read it every day. I tack it up on the bulletin board. And so I started a 30-day exercise with the entire class of reading this every day. And we were asked to put like a topic sentence after each one of these. And so when I say I have traditions, the next thing I say is I get joy and comfort from doing the same things every day or every year. And when I say I am courageous, I say I am honest and gentle with myself and I will do no harm. And my friend Judy says, bull, you are so hard on yourself. But on my best days, I'm not hard on myself. So this is a blueprint for who you can be on your best day. So as I started to do this 30-day of reading my best self, and then we all as a class did 30 days of unexpected kindness, and then we all as a class did 30 days of gratitude, I started to whittle away. I started to notice that there were things that didn't matter anymore because I was focusing on the things that do. So that neuroplasticity that I talked about is competitive. And when you start to build a new neuronal pathway, you start to atrophy the things that you're not working on. Because you have to keep carving that groove over and over again, otherwise it atrophies. So I stopped. And then I said, well, I'm going to do my own 30-day rather than follow theirs, because I started to notice some repetition in my notes as I was doing the 30 days. I did 30 days of the 80-20 rule, where I cut back on things so I could give more to myself. For example, I blocked my calendar before 9 o'clock. I know that that's like so scary to do, but nothing gives me more stress than my Outlook calendar. So I blocked my calendar before 9 o'clock. It didn't mean I wasn't here. It just meant I wasn't going to meet with anybody, and I was going to start my day better. I did 30 days of showing up for myself. So at the end of every day, I asked myself, how did you show up for yourself today? And sometimes they were huge things. Sometimes they were really small things. And then I did 30 days of saying no. This was a shock to my family because I say yes to everything. I am the yes parent. There's a no parent and a yes parent in every house. I am the yes parent. I did 30 days of saying no. And we were on one of our biweekly calls, and I asked Tal Ben-Shahar, the professor, I said, I'm whittling away. I feel like I'm whittling away. And I'm saying no, and I'm feeling really selfish. There's got to be a better word for that, because we're in positive psychology, and I'm being selfish. And he said, you're being self-full. So when you put yourself first, when you say no to somebody else, you're saying yes to yourself. And you're bringing your best self forward. So here's where we get to the whittling. In whittling, there are 4 main themes. And this is a scaffolding. This isn't a how-to. This is a scaffolding for you to think about how can you build your own path to a happier more fulfilling life. It's not about being happy all the time. It's about honoring all of your emotions and getting to happier. So in whittling, there's something called preparing the blank. It's that piece of wood that you buy in the store, you find as you walk through the forest, and only you can see the vision in it. And as you whittle away, chip, chip, and reveal, like Michelangelo said, I saw David in the marble and I chipped away until he came out. That's what whittling is. That's what preparing the blank is. That's what you just started. You just started your core ideal self and preparing the blank. The next thing you do in whittling is you choose the right knife. And to get happier, you don't need a lot of fancy tools. You just need to identify what works for you. Some people meditate. I am not a meditator. I have tried it. I have gone to classes and retreats. I'm not a meditator. But one of the books in your resource list called The Instinct to Heal talked about something called heart-mind coherence breathing. In the Army, they call it tactical breathing. Some people call it square breathing. 4 breaths in, hold for 4 breaths, 4 breaths out, hold for 4 breaths, repeat. 4 counts in a square. In heart-mind coherence breathing, you're connecting your brain to your little brain, the heart, where all your emotions are. And so you breathe in, and when you're holding, you're imagining that your breath is wrapped around your heart, and then you breathe out, and you hold for 4. On the second time, you breathe in, and when your breath is wrapped around your heart, you bring to mind your favorite place on earth, and breathe out, and hold. You do that 4 times, and it's proven to calm anxiety if you practice it daily. I've taught it to everybody I know because it made a huge difference. That was my knife. Not complicated. Centering the blade is the next thing that you do. So if the blade isn't centered in your whittling knife, then you lose your leverage and reduce your power. So I started a new bedtime routine through my 30-day practices, and I got to this point where at the end of every day I would savor the best thing of the day. Rebecca Soni is a Olympic gold medalist. She has the world record in the breaststroke, and she won at the 2008 and 2012 Olympics in London. And she describes her world record breaking race this way. Swim, 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 turn. Swim, 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 turn. Swim, 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 turn. Swim, 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 touch. Turn around. World record. Flashing light bulbs. Somebody popped her out of the pool, gave her a towel, and then down the hallway. Congratulations, thank you, thank you. Up on the podium, national anthem plays. It's over. She says, I wish somebody had told me to stay in the pool. Because it wasn't until 2 years later, when she was watching someone else, one of her teammates, in the Winter Olympics, accept the gold medal, and she heard the national anthem and she saw the flag go up, that she actually felt all of the feelings that come with winning a gold medal. Stay in the pool. Savor the moment. Center your blade. The last thing is working with the grain. This is about working, practice, all of the 30-day rituals. I told you it's not about how I did it, it's how you can do it. And with the grain, meaning be your authentic self. Work with your grain. In whittling, if you don't work with the grain, you hit a knot, you can really hurt yourself. If you're not your authentic self, you can really hurt yourself. If you're trying to be someone else, you can really do some damage. And that thing that I talked about, so I did the VIA strengths exercise, which is so you've done it too, right? Which is also in your resource book. It's a quiz that you take, and it's 140 questions. It takes you about 25 minutes. It's free. It's online on one of the websites. And it will rank the 24 character strengths that have been identified and give you your ranking. So my top 6 are the capacity to love and be loved, zest and enthusiasm, gratitude. Creativity was number 6. It wasn't even in the top 5. Kindness and generosity. When I saw that top 5 list, I was like, well, no wonder I'm unhappy at work. What does that have to do with work? Like, what does the capacity to love and be loved have to do with Bank of America? And then I realized that I had lost my way a little bit, and I wasn't bringing my authentic self to work anymore. And because of that, I was unhappy. And so when I remembered that and I matched up and I started working with the grain and I came back to work as myself, I was happier. Look, most of us don't have a capital M meaning in our lives. There's one Oprah for a reason. There's one Mandela, there's one Malala. There's also one Jill, right? It's our job to make the ordinary extraordinary. It's our job to make every day wonderful. Preparing the blank, choose the right knife. Centering the blade, working with the grain. So at the end of all this, this is what I learned. I am the solution for me, and I would offer to you that you are the solution for you. And I hope that this whittling scaffolding will help you get to a happier, more fulfilling place.